Yo, welcome to the Orange Magic Carps YouTube. Today, we're going to be looking at the matchup spreads for the top battle styles decks through early April. So it's been a few weeks. The meta is starting to develop a bit, not fully. I think unlike the Vivid Voltage meta, this one's going to take a little while to be solved. We're probably going to see some interesting decks pop up slowly but surely. But so far, there appears to be a clear set of best decks, definitely a set of most popular decks, and that's what we're going to focus on. So we're going to be looking at these 9 decks. These are not necessarily the best decks, although they're all very, very good. These are the most popular. This is not in any order. This is not what I think is the 9 best. It's not the 9 best in order. It's, like I said, the 9 most popular decks in online tournaments because they are the ones we have the most data on. There are things that are missing from here that are quite good. There is no Dragapult. There is no Dragapult Urshifu. Victini includes Welder Victini as well. There's no Inteleon. So this is not every single deck in the meta, but these are the ones that are constantly showing up over and over again, and the ones that you should probably at least know about and usually play. The first one we're going to look at is ADPZ. You know it, you love it, probably hate it. One of the beautiful things about ADPZ is it has a lot of even matchups. So I'm not going to go over every single matchup for every single thing, but ADPZ, a lot of good matchup. Mad Party, Lukemetal are both super favorable as long as you're packing the sword. These lists do depend on your list. If you play Vitality Band and no Tool Scrapper, Lukemetal suddenly becomes even to unfavorable. But obviously, debatably, you should be playing Vitality Band, I guess. It depends how much you think Lukemetal is going to be out there, but it's something to worry about. Eternatus and PikaRom are unfavorable. PikaRom, I'm of course biased, and I believe it is unfavorable for ADPZ. Plenty of ADP players will tell me I'm wrong. I say, play a good PikaRom player, and I'll take ADP. It's annoying to play against, but it is a decent matchup. And the Welder decks are technically even, which I think is incredibly interesting. When I was looking at the data, I was looking at the Dino data, and I was expecting the Welder decks to not be quite as 50-50 as they are, but it kind of makes sense. ADP is a pretty 50-50 style of deck. Next one to look at is Rapid Strike Urshifu. The data on this one depends pretty heavily on what your build is. I personally think that we're getting to the point where the Jirachi Net build is the best one. One of the reasons why Jirachi Net has been so good in these VMAX decks, we saw it in Centiskorch, we're seeing it now, isn't because Jirachi's that good. Not that Jirachi's not good. Not that Nets are that good. It's that PikaRom is our best search option for these evolution Pokemon, and being able to Stellar Wish, net the Jirachi, and then PikaRom it away for a VMAX is just really, really good value. So that's personally one I would play, but this includes all variants of Rapid Strike. So depending what your variant is, it might be a little different for each of these. A lot of favorables. It depends if people are teching their Mews or not. I think Tempozard by now, people figured out to play their Mew. Obviously, E-Turn you can't. Mad Party, I've seen people go up to 2 Mews, which feels excessive to me, but also it might just be better. PikaRom obviously does not play a Mew. PikaRom doesn't tech that anyway. You're probably going to lose to Rapid Strike typically. I guess it depends on the Rapid Strike list. Some have played the Mimikyu from Celestial Storm, some have not. If they don't play the Mimikyu from Celestial Storm, it is super winnable. If they play the Mimikyu from Celestial Storm, pack it up. Unfavorables, you have no out to Zamazenta and Welder Mewtwo. They hit you for weakness, but honestly, even without weakness, they're doing a lot to you. But this is one where I expect this to change a bit once we start to get a more established version of the deck. Because you still see people going out there with some very, very, very different lists. And the list does make a pretty big difference. We're never going to make Lukemetal a favor, or even Lukemetal is not a law. You just accept that typically. Like, yeah, you can play Phoebes, but you have to play multiple Phoebes. It's not good. And Welder Mewtwo is something potentially make an even matchup. But the favorables probably stay favorable. I am of the mind you're going to see Tempozard's matchup spread slowly through this. I think Tempozard is better than the data suggests. Part of that is builds. Part of that is it's not an easy deck to play, but the power level makes people gravitate towards it pretty quickly. Victini. So we're talking about both Victini, like straight Victini with just fire stuff, and we're also talking about the Mewtwo Victini in this. depending on which one you're running, it might change these matchup spreads a little bit. But I'm just lumping them together because that gives us way more games to deal with, and the percentages aren't particularly different. So like Mewtwo Victini does have a better PikaRom matchup than straight Victini does. It's not like a super good matchup. Anyway, Lukemetal, you just kind of bop them. Most Victinis are playing Fan of Waves. If you don't play Fan of Waves, it's still favorable, but it's not as favorable. With Fan of Waves, it should essentially be an auto win, assuming you don't brick or you don't play incredibly poorly. Eternatus is one where straight Victini has a better Eternatus matchup because you're not going to start your Mewtwo as often or anything like that. And you're just going to consistently get that turn 2 boss a little more often as well. But again, it's a pretty 50-50 matchup. Do you get the KO on their V before they can evolve to VMAX? If yes, you probably win. ADPZ is a 50-50. That's the one where I've played the matchup from both sides, and I guess it's true, but it always feels better from the Victini side than it does from the ADP side. Eternatus used to be like, oh, what version? So far, it looks like everyone is playing the power plant version, some with hammers, some without. No one's really playing poison anymore. I agree with that completely. Eternatus appears on paper to be the BDIF right now, which is something that I'm never a fan of saying. I'm just not a huge fan of playing Eternatus, but you can't deny the power. Anything with tag teams is a good matchup, which is most of the top decks. Really, Tempozard, PikaRom, Welder, Mewtwo, ADPZ, they all play tag teams. Mad Party doesn't, but Mad Party gets bodied by Power Plant. You play stuff like Hoopa, Spiritomb, Derail, Yveltal plus Zigzagoons, and that becomes a very, very good matchup. Lukemetal, I have seen people playing a Phoebe and a Palpad for the Lukemetal matchup, which might swing it a bit more towards even. I have not tested it from either side, so I don't actually know. But that is an interesting development that's been happening. And if Eternatus can swing the Lukemetal matchup towards even, I think that will solidify it in my mind as the BDIF. But it's something we haven't teched for it either. We should probably start teching for it. Play stadiums against the power plants, play big charms for your tag teams, things like that will start to make the matchup a bit better. Peak, this one surprised me to look at the data. Peak to me is the ultimate like 50-50 deck. To me, it's like, oh, I'm up against a Welder deck. It's an auto win. I'm up against anything else. It's 50-50. But apparently, Welder decks are favorable and everything else is unfavorable, which I slightly disagree with, but also, you can't deny the data and you really look at it and it's like, that's fair. E-turn, you got to hit hammers if you're playing them. If you don't play hammers, the Eternatus matchup's very bad. That's something when I talked about my no hammer peak list before, I was like, I'm being consistent against everything else and kind of taking the L to E-turn. Mad Party's unfortunately a very tough matchup. I lost in top 8 of the Hegster to a Mad Party where, turn 3, they were OHKOing my PikaRom. It's like, that's a lot to keep up with. It's really, really difficult matchup, assuming the Mad Party draws slightly well. And if they draw out a stamp, it's GG's. Rapid Strike depends on the build. I'll have to play the matchup more, but it's not a super good matchup for Peak. And Lukemetal's unfavorable. In the hands of a good player, Lukemetal is a pretty bad matchup now. Lukemetal Peak players have figured out how to make the Peak matchup better. It used to be very good for Peak, because Lukemetal players just couldn't handle taking out a Boltund, like a second Boltund, but now it's becoming significantly tougher. So Peak, surprisingly polarizing matchup spread. Tempozard, whatever you want to call it, Blounds, etc. This is one where, again, I kind of disagree with the matchup spread through my testing, but you got to go with what the data says. So you bop Lukemetal pretty effectively. Victini is a good matchup. ADPZ is a good matchup. It does depend. Victini playing Stamp is going to be harder, of course. And ADPZ is just an awkward matchup because you cannot miss a beat. Unfavorables, E-turn with plants can be very annoying. Mad Party's tough. Any single prize deck is tough. They get down their Mew, so you can't snipe their Dedenne. You're in an awkward spot. Peak is a pretty bad matchup. Stamp plus Swell, and you just kind of hope if you draw out of Stamp, you win. If you don't draw out of Stamp, you lose. Rapid Strike, you got to get those Mews down. You should be playing Mew for sure in your Tempozard list. If you saw my video on Tempozard, I think Gamer's List is the best one currently. Maybe make a change or two here and there, but he's got a Mew. You should play a Mew as well. Welder Mewtwo is also a tough one, mostly because they can shove something very big in the active and, of course, stamp you low. They can also Venom Shot the what's it called? The Oricorio GX plus Stamp, which is a very killer play. Mad Party. I've heard people talk about Mad Party's not a meta deck. Mad Party's a good deck. Level Ball made Mad Party something that is significantly scarier than it used to be. So if you're still on the train of like Mad Party's not meta, Mad Party's not, a tier 2 deck, you got to get out of that mindset. This is a very, very good deck. Yes, it's got a couple bad matchups, but so does everything, as you've noticed. So Tempozard, PikaRom, Victini variants, a little depending, but Victini variants and Welder Mewtwo are all pretty favorable. Lukemetal's even, which I don't get it. Mad Party might just be too fast for that, but I think Lukemetal, in my brain, should be a very unfavored matchup, but good for Mad Party. Apparently it's about a 50-50. Unfavorable, ADPZ, obviously, you're a single prize deck. You got to pop off, and the ADPZ player usually has to make some mistakes to win that game. E-turn's bad. They play plant. Most Mad Parties don't play a stadium, like by far. You rely on Dedenne a lot for draw. So, good way to tech that would be add a swell, but they also play a lot of baby attackers, which can be annoying. And Rapid Strike Urshifu, being able to snipe is very scary for this deck. I think Mad Party can find a way to make that matchup more close to even, but as of right now, it appears to be a pretty bad matchup. So, Mad Party, surprisingly good matchup spread, with the exception of ADPZ and Eternatus, which are arguably the two best decks in the format right now. So this is one of those, if you expect people to not bring those two, this is a very, very good choice. But most tournaments are going to have ADP and Eternatus as like the first and second or first and third most popular deck. We got Welder Mewtwo. Depends on the variant. Aurora, no Aurora. We've seen a lightning version with a Vikavolt in it. Sure. I'm just going to lump them all together. Play whichever one you kind of like the most. I'm a fan of the Aurora just because I like options. If I'm going to play Mewtwo, I don't just want it to be a bad version of Tempozard. I want it to be a deck that gives me a bunch of options, a bunch of different plays, and makes my opponent play around a ton of stuff. So favorable to Tempozard. You play Reset Stamp. Rapid Strike, you have a favorable matchup. You hit them for weakness, and even if you can't hit them for weakness, you have stuff like Incineroar that hits very hard. You can always Venom Shot the Jirachi GX or Great Catcher It or whatever, and you just kind of body them from there. And you have Victini is a favorable matchup because you're a tag team deck in there, not the Welder, of course Victini plays Welder. The Mewtwo Victini deck is a little worse of a matchup, but still on the favorable side. ADPZ's even, Lukemetal's even. I found those both to be quite interesting, but I think a lot of Lukemetals have been playing Power Plant lately. And because of the Power Plant in Lukemetal, that is making the matchup a bit closer to even because it's removing your options, just kind of making you a bad Welder deck. And then you also don't have a way to deal with the coding energy, depending on your list. Some do play Victina, which makes you a bad Welder deck who's also not hitting for weak. And obviously E-turn's bad, PikaRom's bad, Stamp Paralysis exists, Mad Party, they hit you for weakness. They play a lot of Gust to KO that Jirachi. And also, even if they don't hit you for weakness, they're trading pretty favorably with you. They can win in about 3 attacks. And our last one is Lukemetal. Lukemetal I thought was dead. It's coming back mostly because the Welder decks are falling a bit. So E-turn, Rapid Strike, the VMAX decks are good matchups. Shove a Zamazenta up. Well, you have to do a little more than shove a Zamazenta up there, but shove a Zamazenta up there, you win. Peak is a good matchup. You KO the Boltons so that they can't get up to enough damage, and you're good to go. Mad Party, I think Mad Party should be a favorable matchup for Lukemetal. I know it's technically not, but if you're struggling with that matchup, I'd say practice it more and you'll be fine. Remember, Steel Fist does KO Bundle Beasts. That's something Lukemetal players seem to be forgetting when I play against them on the ladder. Welder Mewtwo is also even. The power plants do help quite a bit, like I said, in the Mewtwo section. Unfavorable, ADPZ, they play Sword. Sword is very annoying to deal with. They only have to take 2 knockouts, and yeah. Victini, unfavorable matchup. They usually play Fan of Waves. Tempozard, unfavorable matchup. They play 2 Zards, which can be very annoying. They play Blounds, and they can just outspeed you pretty darn effective. So overall, I was a bit surprised when I was looking at the data, but you can't deny what hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of games are showing us. Some make sense. Lukemetal loses to fire, can beat everything else. That checks out. Stuff like Mad Party makes sense. Tempozard being unfavorable against so much stuff, I find that super interesting. I want to test it more because Tempozard to me feels really good against all this stuff. Like, I don't mind playing against a lot of those decks. And this might just be, the people who are bringing Tempozard are not following the correct line of play. The deck can brick in a best of 1, and maybe the data's skewing a bit that way. But that one's curious to me. And E-Turn looks to be absolutely banana. Let me know what you think of these. Let me know what you're rocking right now. If you disagree with any of these as well, like I said, these are based off the data from the Limitless tournaments, not my testing. So there are a few things where I'm kind of like, maybe not, but also you can't deny hundreds of games that have happened on the Limitless platform versus, 10 games that I've played myself. There's a bit of merit to listening to what they have so far, but you can't listen to that solely. You do have to also kind of take your own testing into account. Make sure to check out the Twitch channel. We'll be playing some Pokemon a lot. I don't know. Whenever I'm live, which is usually Tuesday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and the occasional Wednesday, depending on work meetings. So check out the Twitch channel below. Remember to like, comment, subscribe, and I'll catch you all in the next video. Peace out, everyone.